Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Al Getler here. I'm coming to you from the United States of America, specifically Vermont, specifically northwestern Vermont, where the sun has been shining today, along with some snow. It's actually been quite beautiful. The temperatures dropped, which is what we like, gets that ice frozen up. It supports our economy, all the good stuff you guys know for business. Talking to a friend of mine this morning who's up at Smuggler's Notch. She's the marketing manager up there. And, listen, things are happening, things are moving. We like that. So, yeah, talking about the economy, talking about business. We're going on a world stage today. We're recording this today on January the 20th. We just inaugurated a new president, vice president. Pretty exciting day for our democracy in America when that happens. I'm an old softy. My flag is flying high. I believe in democracy for what we have going on here. So that's as political and commentary as I'm going to get. Hey, yesterday I was waiting for a book to show up, and actually towards the end of the live stream, it showed up. So let me hold it up. Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. Okay. This is a revolutionary book, in my opinion. Big fan of Donald's. Follow his story brand information that he's done. This book, why it's, I think, revolutionary. It's not in chapters. It's in 60 different entries that you read over the course of 60 days. As a result of that, you also get emails with videos for the book contained within that you read every 60 days. Donald's theory is that, look, you can pay for a big MBA and counter to what we're going to talk about with my friend in a second. But here's a way to get an MBA pretty quickly with the content he has in the book and on video. So anyway, I don't get a thing for doing this. Just that I'm a fan of Donald's. I requested so we can get Donald on the show sometime. But go out and get the book. And you'll love it. Also, check out the Story Brand book by he and Dr. J.J. Peterson. So there you go. There's my recommendation for today. So I am thrilled about today's guest. And he's been my guest a couple of times in all of my different playgrounds that I have. This guest of mine became a quick friend in the Boston area. And we have one thing in common. Actually, we have a lot in common, including our affinity to the Red Sox, even though a lot of people have commented about my Mets clock over here. That's another story for another day. But leadership. My guest today is Michael F. Andrew. He and I really connected when it came to the subject of leadership. And one of my first video projects was at the North of Boston Media Group in the Eagle Tribune building in North Andover, Massachusetts. He was one of my guests way back then. And here he is today back again. So let me tell you what's interesting about Michael. He has been in the Middle East for over a dozen years. He went over there to do some work and remains. In fact, here he is after one of his speaking engagements with another company from the one he works with. But he has a lot of insights to offer. He is an author. We'll talk about his books in a minute. But let's not wait any further. Let's bring him here onto the live stream and say hello to Michael Andrew. Hey, Michael.
Hello, Al. How are you?
I am good, man. How are you?
Good. I miss Vermont.
You do. I know. We've talked about your affinity to New England, too, overall and all that. But, hey, so I like to start these conversations with, where are we talking to you from? And I think you're going to get the distance prize for my show so far. So where exactly are you in the world, Michael?
I'm in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Nice. How's the weather there? Is it snowing?
You know something? I was thinking about this morning. You wake up every day and you never have to worry about if it's going to rain. It probably rains about 6 days a year. Yeah. So you can count on, it's kind of cool right now, but it's perfect cool. You
What's
can wear
cool?
a sweater.
Just describe cool to me.
Wearing a sweater.
Like
wearing a
50s?
Sweater. It'd be the equivalent of about 50. 55.
Okay.
Yeah, about 50 in Boston. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Which is a warm spring day here. So let's put it all together, right? Right. Michael, I had that picture up here of you, and for those of us who are culturally void of knowing a lot about the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, tell us the situation you're in here. What's going on? Who are these gentlemen that you're with, et cetera?
Well, I was invited. This was probably 6 years ago. I was invited to speak to, they called their high potential elites. They were graduating and they wanted me to come by and give a little talk about some career tips for a successful career.
Got
One of
it.
the gentlemen, the one on my immediate left, actually is a good friend. We were both vice presidents together in Abu Dhabi and Dubai for a company called Etisalat, which
Uh-huh.
is which is the equivalent of like Verizon or AT&T in the UAE.
Okay, got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My friend Fayez, great guy.
Got it. Okay. So you were over there initially, though, to talk about leadership. So why? I mean, your career real quickly. You were with, after you. By the way, I have to advertise this. I've got your Suffolk MBA shirt on here, but you also did some work at Babson as well, all in the Boston area. But you went to McKinsey, which is a popular place for people to go. McKinsey Consulting, McKinsey and Associates. But then you headed over to the Middle East. And was that supposed to initially be a short assignment? Give us the background on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was a consultant for McKinsey.
Oh, for
So
McKinsey.
I
Okay.
yeah, so I coached over 400 of their consultants.
Nice.
No,
Wow.
what happened in the Middle East is I was brought out there in late 1995, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to do a month-long assignment with that company, Etisalat, or Emirates Telecommunications Corporation. And I was subcontracted out there with a consulting firm, very well-known consulting firm, global firm. And I immediately started building relationships out there with those people. Then they invited me out 2 or 3 more times to do small projects. Eventually, at Etisalat, they offered me one role, and I said, nah, I didn't want that role. Then 2 years later, they called me up and they flew me from Boston to Abu Dhabi, business class
Wow.
or first class, put me in a hotel, picked me up the next day. I met with them and they said, we just reorganized. We have this new job. Do you want it? I said, that's it? You could have done this over the phone. And they said, no, Mike. Yeah, because relationships is really, really,
I was going to
really
say
big there.
that's a cultural thing, I'm sure, right?
Well, relationships is important everywhere in the world, but certainly in the Middle East. And so we were joking about it. They said, no, we wanted to see you. It's been a while. And it wasn't even an interview. They just said, you wanted, it was a nice job. It was a vice president job. And I said, sure. And they said, when can you start? So that was how things happened.
When can you start?
Yeah.
So you have to go at that point, for those of us to wrap our brains around this. You're there, you offered the job, you got to start it, you got to figure out when to start it, but you got to go home and kind of get ready for something like that. How do you do that?
It really wasn't that difficult. Because I'd been there a few times before, and I really, really enjoyed the lifestyle in United Arab Emirates, both in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So, but to be honest with you, Al, I was convinced it would probably be a 6-month to a 1-year role because I wanted to get back to the U.S. And have a real job in the U.S. But
yeah, I kind of figured that was the case.
Yeah.
That was yeah, you kind of figured in and out, get the thing done, and you've been there now. Is it almost 13 years?
About 12 years.
12 years. Okay,
Almost
right.
12 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I'm so glad if someone ever told me when I was a young kid, Mike, you're going to be spending 12 years in the Middle East, I would have panicked. I would have said, no, don't do that. Don't do that to me. But it's made my life actually better. I can get into that in a little bit, but it's actually made my life unexpectedly better.
Well, when I met you, you were home for a visit. Is that correct? When we met at Merrimack?
No, I was still living there. I was living up in Lake Winnipesaukee, up in New Hampshire.
Okay. So that was right before you left for the
yeah, that was right before I left.
Yeah,
2009.
And what brought us really together too is the fact that you wrote a book, and we talked about this: How to Think Like a CEO and Act Like a Leader, which is an excellent book and an excellent mindset. It's one of 2 of your books. The other one is The Greatest Leader He Ever Saw. So, which one came first? Just remind me.
The How to Think Like a CEO and Act Like a Leader it was actually featured on Fox Morning News in Boston.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and then the second book came after that. And the second book is that a parable book? Is that something where you've written that as a parable, correct?
Yeah. It's if your audience members, if any of you ever read the 1 Minute Manager, it's about 100 pages. You can read it quickly in about an hour or 2. This is the same concept. It's a story about well, I don't want to get into a lot of detail unless you want me to, but it's a story that the main point of that book is all about character and integrity.
Right.
You can have all the leadership competencies in the world, but if you don't have character integrity, forget it.
Yeah. No, I got
And
it.
that's
Yeah.
what that book was about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an incredible way to learn. You've done it. You mentioned 1 Minute Manager. Patrick Lencioni, who's one of my favorite business plan authors, is another guy that has done that really, really successfully, where you use a parable and you present a business model. And so that's been pretty great. So, one of the ways that Michael, you have been gaining attention, you have an audience, and I'm gonna put on the screen up here, one of your in the background, without the sound, but just share this. You have been doing a number of videos on LinkedIn that have been getting really, quite a bit of attention. You can see the statistics on this one. 2,487 views, 126 comments, and really, what you're giving here is kind of practical, good advice on a number of subjects. And it's fun to see them because they're all staged about the same. But your advice for these are really something that's well received by your audience. And by your audience, I mean you've got over 10,000 followers, on LinkedIn. So it's really a powerhouse place for you to be. So, what is it that you talk about in those LinkedIn videos, and why do you think they're so popular?
Well, actually, I begin every video with saying, this is Mike Andrew, once again providing a short video with practical insights relating to business and leadership. And it's all about practical, nothing about theory. I'm not smart enough to do theory or concept. So it's all about the practical
You
insights.
say that all the time, and to that I say, bunch of crap, whatever. Yeah.
But it seems to resonate with people, the practical day-to-day things that we can do to be more effective.
Yeah. So jumping into that, some of the things you've had has been about really how a person approaches their work. And one of the things I love that you talked about recently was, for your career, kind of stepping up and doing the hard work. That talent is one thing. And it's so funny. I'm going to throw something into this too, because I got a text from my daughter who's upset. She's a senior in high school. She's currently applying for colleges. She's doing okay with an Ivy League school. Found out one of her classmates is also applying to that same Ivy League school. She was very upset, and I gave her this litany of why she needs to not be upset. That the hard work, what she's put into her career as a student, is more important than what is seen on an application or a piece of paper. But in your case, Michael, and I want to turn it back to you, you say stepping up and doing hard work and talent is overrated. Give us a little bit of what that's about.
Okay. Do you mind if I just go on for a few minutes here? Because
by all means. Look, if you're the guest, the stage is yours. I'm going to give you the screen and step back. So go.
Stop me and interrupt me anytime you want. But first of all, let's start with the stepping up. I just think, it's so critical to step up when no one else will. And let me give you an example. I always like to tell the story. You have your Suffolk University shirt on. I got my MBA at Suffolk, and the MBA program was a case methodology MBA. The case method. And I took one of the courses that I was required to take was operations management. Certainly not one of my strong points. And in this particular class, 50% of the grade was based on your active participation in class. So I'm like, okay, I think I can control that. So you try to participate because you want to get a good grade. One day the professor comes in with a Business Week article. He said, there's an article here in Business Week that's relevant to what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks. I'm looking for a volunteer to read the article, come back next week and just give a 5-minute overview on it. And so who would like to do that? So boop, I raised my hand. Nobody else raised a hand, maybe 1 or 2 other people, but I raised my hand. He gave me the magazine. I read it, gave my 5-minute overview next week. About 2 weeks later, he did the same thing. He came back in. I have another Business Week article. Now remember, 50% of the grade is participation. And these are MBA students, very serious students. He said, I have another article here from Business week. This time I said, I'm going to give somebody a chance. Nobody raised their hand. I was shocked. The MBA students, nobody raised their hand. So I waited a few seconds. Boop, up goes my hand. He gave me the thing, and I did my thing, gave my 5-minute overview. A course that I should not have gotten an A in, I got an A because I just stepped up and did something simple. One other example of stepping up is, what's that?
I say participation, being willing to stick your neck out there, doing something, and it's, to me, it's the doers are the ones that rule the world, so to speak, the work world anyway.
Right. And then when I was with that company at Tislat, I was a vice president there. We had a partnership agreement with another company in Spain, large telecom company called Telefonica. And different parts of the company would work with Telefonica because we were not competitors, and we would share experiences and knowledge and learnings and so forth. So in our function, in our sector, nobody was doing anything. So I said, well, I might as well volunteer. So I volunteered, and we had some sessions with Telefonica around talent and leadership, very productive for both of us. But I did it because nobody else would do it. Nobody else would step up. So that's the stepping up piece. The next one you talk about, talent is overrated. I use that term because it's based on a book that came out by an author named Jeffrey Colvin a number of years ago. And the title itself tells you it all. Talent. And really, it's all about hard work. If you've got talent and you don't apply yourself, look at kids that get A's in school. Why do they get A's? Because they're working hard at it.
Right.
And I have many examples. I have many examples of this one. But the book gets into Tiger Woods and Mozart. Tiger Woods just didn't start playing golf great when he was 5 years old. I mean, his father loved golf. His father was a strong disciplinarian that put him through a structured routine over the years. Tiger happened to love golf, so it's not like he was forced into it. And he developed his talent over time. And Mozart's father was a very famous composer as well. And so he trained Mozart very rigorously. Mozart happened to love music. And we know what was natural for both Mozart and Tiger Woods is that they loved what they did. And so, and I always give the example of coming from the Boston area, Al, the Boston Bruins, a professional hockey team.
Oh, yeah.
There's one of the hockey players that's retired, and his jersey is actually retired. His name is Terry O'Reilly, number 24. Oh, yeah. It's retired. Terry O'Reilly was one of the worst skaters I've ever seen of a professional hockey player. But the fans loved him enough that they retired his jersey because he worked hard.
Yeah.
He worked hard at it. He didn't have the talent, but he worked. And I've seen many great athletes. I played a lot of sports myself, and I've seen some great athletes that had natural ability, but they just couldn't get into the game. They just couldn't. Right. In ice hockey, they wouldn't go where the puck was. They could skate beautifully.
Yeah.
But I saw less talented people that were better hockey players because they worked hard at it.
No, I have to agree with you too on hockey. I mean, obviously where I live, where we live in New England, being a Olympic dance skater is not part of hockey. So absolutely. So let me just, for folks who are just joining us, kind of tell folks, our guest today is Michael Andrew, the author of How to Think Like a CEO and Act Like a Leader, as well as his other book, The Greatest Leader He Ever Saw. Michael's joining us from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he lives and has lived for a dozen years. So he's sharing some of his wisdom from that today. So, Michael, one thing that you've also said that I've seen you talk about is kind of on this theme of talent or knowledge, and boy, I should read to you the diatribe I wrote to my daughter when she wrote to me, but you call it attitude versus aptitude. Can you kind of cover that with us? What do you mean by attitude versus aptitude?
Well, attitude, it's also part of working hard, and I'll take attitude over aptitude any day. In the leadership development field, the talent management field, there's a lot of work around competencies, what we call leadership competencies, and honestly, I've never seen any correlation between those that score well with competencies and those that succeed in business, because I'll take their attitude any day over wherever they are with competencies and wherever they are with aptitude. So, it's really just a simple concept, and I think it builds off hard work.
Yeah,
And
I believe so as well. I think it does too. But when it comes to experience and talent and all that, you also say the best development is free. So what do you mean by
oh,
that?
oh, well, thank you. I'm glad you picked up on that. You know, you think about all the money that's being spent on. I was working with one company, and they worked. They all of the, I'd say the top 100 or so. They all had a budget to send each of those top 100 to a different part of the world, like INSEAD or IMD or London Business School or Harvard Business School, to take a 1 week, 2 week course. So can you imagine the expense? It's great for the universities, but can you imagine the expense on the company to send all those people? And sometimes they went to 2 courses.
Yeah.
And I went to this company. I said, this is crazy. This is crazy. So anyway, that's a little backdrop. But to me, what I've learned over the years, Al, is the best development is free. And the two types of development that are free: experience and feedback.
Mm,
The
wow.
experience
Yeah.
I've gained over the years has made me, hopefully, more effective and much better at what I do than any training course I could have taken over the years. So the experience day by day over the years has been the best development opportunity. Now, when we do development for our senior executives and we prepare them for succession, you're not going to see
We have a latency problem with Michael. He'll catch up to us here in a second.
Yeah.
You had a little latency issue, Michael. So repeat that.
Yeah. So the second one is feedback. And having done some work with McKinsey, their number one method of development is feedback. Now, feedback and experience are free. And I mean, I have so many examples of giving feedback. I was a board advisor. I would give feedback to the board members, even the chairman, those that were stepping up and really providing value. And I would have to jump in and give feedback for those that weren't stepping up and providing value. And at that level, board level, most of them really take that feedback very seriously and turn around dramatically. So being able to give feedback like we did at McKinsey, their number one method of development, there was an article in Sloan Management Review that came across my desk one time and said McKinsey's number one method of development, feedback. I'm like, wow, let me read this because I did some work there. And they were right on. So there's nothing more powerful than feedback to help you self-direct and improve.
Well, I know for me, and maybe you've been through some of these devices, but I took the 360-degree leadership survey. Are you familiar with that survey?
Well, there's thousands of them.
Yeah, but this particular one, okay, but you get the idea. The 360 is your direct reports, the people who are your peers, your bosses, even your boss's boss, et cetera. And talk about feedback, talk about brutal feedback, talk about 2 days worth of feedback, after you take something like that. I have to be honest with you, I wasn't good at feedback prior to that experience. So there is a skill for receiving feedback, right? Can you talk about that for a second? Like, we can take feedback and we can go, ugh, what does that guy know? What does that lady know? Or we can do something else.
Okay, you're raising something very few people would even think along the lines you're thinking, Al. So I really appreciate it. Of course, giving feedback is all about having the courage because you care enough to give feedback.
Right.
Receiving feedback, to your question, very simple. Thank you. That's all you got to do. Thank you. Because that person cared enough to give you feedback, and hopefully it was candid feedback with ways, suggestions that what you could have done differently. So if someone has taken the time and effort to step up and give you candid feedback of what you did well, balance it, and what you could do differently, all you got to do is say thank you. You don't need to be defensive. There's always time to explain at the end what you did and why you did it. But it starts out with thank you and really listening to the feedback. So that's a big part of receiving it.
Yeah, and I think it's a maturity thing, right? I mean, and talk about maturity. I mean, I was in my 30s when I was learning that lesson, so it wasn't like I was a teenager, that I had to hear that. And then I remember getting back from that 360 feedback on it was you took the survey, time went on, you went away for a couple of days, and you came back. But then I came back to my office, and then I remember one of the people that reported to me, Janet, said, "Well, what'd you learn?" And I started telling her how devastated I was by some of the feedback. And that was another 2-hour session with her on getting feedback from a subordinate. So I value that feedback, and I've learned that feedback is getting it is hard. Processing it is something we need to learn. To learn a skill on processing the feedback.
It is, and unfortunately, most organizations don't have that culture. McKinsey had a culture where they gave feedback on everything. If you facilitated a meeting, there was someone to give you feedback after that meeting. To the point where, when I was doing my work with McKinsey, when I first started, I'd be observing certain people, and after the meeting, I would give them feedback, and I'd say, you did this well, you did this well, you did that well. Now, the area that you can improve would be this. And the McKinsey partner stopped me and said, no, Mike, do it the other way around. What we want to hear is what you could do better, what you could do better, what you could do better. And by the way, you did this well. And what happened is I became very, very comfortable giving that candid feedback because it's ingrained in their culture.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I think that, again, taking that feedback is, coaching is a subject when it comes to feedback. People seem to take it better when you call somebody a coach versus a manager. And I think it's also a mindset of a leader too, from the standpoint of giving feedback to somebody. Are you going to give them feedback to nail them to the wall, or are you going to coach them to improve their performance? So I think part of that lies with us as the leader as well, to say, I'm going to coach you and give you some feedback, and let's talk on a plan of what we can do. And by the way, feedback doesn't always have to be what's wrong, right? We can give feedback to somebody and say, hey, you're an amazing, you do this in a really, really well, and I think you can even do it better, right? Can that be a form of feedback?
Of course. There's nothing more powerful than that. And by the way, feedback doesn't have to be from manager to employee. It could be peer to peer. If there's someone you trust that will be candid and honest with you. A personal example, Al, when I was a vice president at that company in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, I would, you're giving feedback as often as you can, but once a quarter, I would have a formal sort of review meeting with each of my staff and talk about, what's going well, what we could do differently. But I would end each meeting, because these would be one-on-ones, I would end each meeting giving them the opportunity to give me feedback. And they loved it. And I'll tell you something, it opened my eyes to a few things that I wasn't even aware of.
Wow.
So by them giving me feedback, it actually, I think, made me more effective, because otherwise I wouldn't have been aware of what was bothering them or what they might have been thinking. So giving them the opportunity to give me, their boss, feedback was very powerful for them. And I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I think that's, the immediate feedback piece too is another thing that irks me, especially as a person who's led a bunch of people. For some reason, we as leaders, managers, coaches, we let too much time go by. And you're talking about this culture of immediate feedback, where, you hit me up for a review, right? Remember the yearly review, right? And you hit me up with feedback from something that happened 11 and a half months ago. I mean, what? I mean, seriously? How about giving me feedback as soon as it happened? And I love what you say about that. I think that's really, really important. So,
Sure.
I think we could do a whole conversation here. And obviously, Michael, we have to have you back. We're into almost a half hour of your time, and I want to be respectful of that. So, but I think that's great. Let me jump into one more thing that you like to talk about. And I think this is something you were just saying about me. I'm not blowing this my way, but we were talking about before we went live, the art of listening. And you say people warmly listen as the number one leadership and life skill. So you're saying that listening is the number one skill a person can have. Is that correct?
Well, if someone pushed me up again, because I've gotten that question many times, Mike, what do you think is the most important leadership skill? And you don't want to answer that question, but if I was pushed up and someone said, please, what would be the one skill that you think would be great to perfect? I always say listening, because it's also not just a business skill, a leadership skill, it's a life skill. And I know I could tell you, none of us are perfect, right? And I could tell you, even in my personal life, when I didn't do things that the right way to, my significant other or wife or whatever, if I just simply listening and hear them out, it diffuses the situation. But listening, even at McKinsey, I keep going back to McKinsey. we train them how to listen, especially when they had an irate customer. You know, there's one scenario, a case study where you know, it's a fake, it's fiction, where something was leaked out to the media that was very confidential. And the only one that knew about it was the CEO of McKinsey. And
Wow.
so the CEO comes in and screams at McKinsey, screams at the consultant, and we train them to just don't fight back, don't listen, don't give your rationale. Let them be vocal as they need, and just let them do it, and then listen. Then there's always time to tell your side of the story.
Yeah.
But listening is, I always say, one of the great business skills, leadership skills, is the ability to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say the best way to learn how to ask questions is to listen, like what you do well. You know, when you're listening well, it conjures up other questions, whether it's for clarification or for more insight.
Right. Right. So, you know, on that note, I'm fascinated by culture and cultural differences. You know, if I were going to come to work with you in Riyadh, right, in the Middle East, what do I need to know culturally about some of these things we've talked about listening, about giving feedback, about, you know, hard work? What is there? Is this an international language, or is this something, just for a second, getting into the culture? And for those that are joining us, real quickly, I'll just show you. Our guest is Michael Andrew. Michael is talking to us from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He's the author of 2 leadership books. One is How to Think and Act Like a CEO, which is about the time that I met him, and then a parable book, The Greatest Leader He Ever Saw. But as we showed there, I flashed for a second this shot. You have worked in Saudi Arabia now for a dozen years. You're originally from the Boston area. And I'm asking you, so Michael, culturally, what do I need to know to make the leap that you've made, which to me is a fascinating leap?
What do you need to know around what? Around the culture?
Well, just about some of the subjects you've mentioned, listening, giving feedback.
Okay.
You know, would that be different in versus, you know, an American company versus a Saudi Arabia company?
Well, first of all, just to let you know, I worked and lived in Dubai for 5 years.
Okay.
And now Saudi for 6. So
Dubai part of the United Arab Emirates, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So things like you're talking about, like listening and hard work, stepping up, giving feedback. That's universal. You know, that's human.
Okay.
It's there's nothing unique about the culture. Now, if you want to get into some unique cultural things, I have a whole storage full of interesting examples that I think would shatter the misperceptions of what it's like living and working with people in Saudi Arabia.
Well, give us one. Just give us one so we understand, you know, some of the things that we might want to know about, you know.
Okay, well, I'll tell you something. In all my life, I've never been treated with such generosity, hospitality, and respect, period.
Wow.
Americans, we can learn a lot from the Saudi culture with their generosity, hospitality, and the way I've been treated with respect. You know, I've been fortunate to go over to be invited over some people's homes. I grew up Italian, so I know what it's like to have a lot of food.
Yeah.
And your grandmother, your aunt says, "Keep eating, keep eating."
Yeah.
The Saudis will put them to shame. It's like Thanksgiving times 2, and they want you to keep it. You know, they're just very hospitable. But it's not just food. It's the things you see every day. The level of respect and generosity. I mean, people always calling you over to have tea or coffee. It's wonderful. It's been a great experience.
Well, you know, during this pandemic, I've said to a number of my guests here, Michael, that, you know, when things get better, I'm going to come visit you. So I don't know, maybe I never got to see my daughter when she was in Abu Dhabi teaching. So I need to maybe fulfill that and get to see the Middle East, because I would love to. That would be amazing.
Yeah. You should.
Absolutely amazing. So, Michael, I don't want to let you go before I ask you, you know, is there something we haven't touched on today that you would like to touch on? Especially as I recognize today here in the United States, it's January 20th, 2021. We're going through a change of leadership as a nation. And this is not a political discussion. This is a leadership discussion. Anything you want to just add to that conversation?
Well, you know something, I don't want to get into politics either. It's a dangerous thing today, unfortunately. But I will say, I wish politics I wish the one practice that we could see in politics is the notion of treat issues coldly, people warmly. Treat issues coldly. President Reagan, conservative, Republican. Tip O'Neill from Boston, Speaker of the House, Democrat, liberal. They disagreed on everything.
Absolutely.
Vehemently. And you know something? At the end of the day, they were good buddies.
They were indeed.
They were really good buddies. And that's how civil discourse should be. Treat issues coldly, people warmly.
I love that. And, you know, again, we tap into my daughter and my wife and I talk a lot about what's going on in the world. And one of the things just last week, the week before, I had my laptop on the kitchen counter during breakfast, and I was showing my daughter pictures of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill together in many different situations. And I was middle school into high school during that presidency, right? And I just remember it as warmly as you do, from the standpoint of a president and a Speaker of the House being able to get things done that way. So again, not being political, but I believe good discourse is what it's all about in life anyway. And in that case, I love what you say. Say it again.
Well, you know, treat issues coldly, people warmly.
Issues coldly, people warmly. Love it.
They're not mutually exclusive. Interestingly, speaking about Abu Dhabi and Tip O'Neill, one of my flights to Abu Dhabi or Dubai, I forget which, from Boston, I got on the plane and sitting next to me was Tip O'Neill's son. He was the lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, a former lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, and he was sitting next to me on the plane, and I mentioned that to him. I said, you know, I always admired your father and Reagan, how the two of them disagreed on everything, but they were really good buddies, and he agreed with me.
Yeah,
it was interesting to see.
Yeah, well, I was so inspired. I had to put that up there and capitalize the P in people. So I just think it's a great thing to live by. So that's,
by the way, Al, the last thing I have to say before we go, when it comes to leadership, we could talk about all the leadership concepts and leadership theories in the world, but you know something? If you don't have character and integrity, which is what the greatest leader he ever saw is about, if you don't fundamentally have character and integrity, forget about all the competencies and everything else you might be good at, because the bottom line is you got to have integrity and character.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, and I've seen a lot of people who call themselves leaders that didn't have those things, and you know, it's chilling sometimes. It's also chilling as to how long some of them can be in a position and move on to a different position. You go, how did she or he do that, knowing that they have very little integrity and people? I mean, you nailed it. To me, you know, an organization is built on the pillar of how strong the people are and how they are perceived as a valued part of an organization. So it's funny. I'm listening to Michael Iger of now the chairman, but the former CEO of recently of the Walt Disney Company, talk about just that, and the acquisition of Pixar and Marvel and some of the other acquisitions he made as CEO. And you know, he said, really, you're buying not a company, you're acquiring the people who work in that company and what they bring to the table. So very, very important that we consider that. And you know, Michael, I love talking to you, and I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. I said it once already. I'm going to say it again. Any parting thoughts before we go? Because we just keep on going on and on about things.
Well, to deviate from the leadership piece, I appreciate you bringing in about my experience living in the Middle East. And all I'll say is a parting thought for all those listening out there. We can learn a lot about the culture of the Saudi people. Women are treated very well. Women want to wear black. They're proud of their culture. They're proud of their country. The family orientation, you can't believe what the family you go to any park. There's a lot of parks where I do walking for my exercise, and every night on weekends it's crowded with families and young children. You know, and their teachings is all about manners. And as a matter of fact, when they talk about, we hear that women are treated badly, they're treated well. And let me tell you one thing that is in their teaching. The most important person in the family is the mother. The second most important person in the family is the mother. And the third most important person in the family is the mother.
Wow.
And the fourth is the father. That's according to the prophet. And they respect Christianity. Matter of fact, I always say that they're more Christian than Christians are, because they cannot be a Muslim if they don't believe in Jesus. There's a whole chapter in the Quran devoted to Mary, or Maryam.
Mm-hmm.
Their prophet Muhammad felt most closest to Jesus of all the prophets, and Jesus is written throughout the Quran. And they simply believe in one God, and don't we all? That's the first commandment of the 10 Commandments. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
Yeah.
And but what they teach around family, and by the way, they're taught to teach their wives very well too. So women, you go to any bank or anything, the women go right to the front of the line.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's great to hear.
Great culture.
And as you know, today's a big day in history for women of America, of all nationalities, with our new vice president. So, and again, as a father of 3 daughters, I'm very excited for them to see this point in history. Again, no politics, just that point in history. So, well, Michael, Andrew, it is always an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I want to remind folks, Michael has 2 books that you can grab off Amazon. One is How to Think Like a CEO and Act Like a Leader. The other is a parable-based book. It's called The Greatest Leader He Ever Saw, and it's available also on Amazon. If you just joined us too, I'll put this up here one more time. Michael, as it said under his name key, joined us from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We had some great signal here today, Michael. We only had a little bit of latency issues, so I couldn't be more pleased. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today, Michael. I'm going to have you head backstage as I say a proper goodbye to our audience. But for now, this is goodbye for you. And I want to say a proper goodbye to you backstage. So I'll see you in just a moment.
Hey, thanks. Always good to see you, Will. Thank you very much. Same here,
Michael. Thank you very much. Well, my pleasure to bring to you another one of my colleagues, friends. Michael has just been a delight to know over these years. And it's just been a blast. So I look forward to having more conversations with him here on my live stream. I do want to tell you that tomorrow we have another Disney executive joining us, former Disney executive. His name is Lee Kitchen. Kind of a different take. I've had a couple of operational people on here. Lee is one of the creative thinkers in Disney, and I think you're going to really enjoy him and what he's going to bring to us, theory-wise. So stick around for that, or not stick around. That would be 24 hours. Tune in for that tomorrow at 2 p.m. And until that time, I look forward to seeing you here on Al Gatler Live. And you have yourself a fantastic day.